Meanwhile, Moscow and Kyiv are both reporting intense fighting, namely in Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia region. The Russian Defense Ministry has released a video claiming to show Ukrainian tanks and armored vehicles being destroyed by Russian troops. However, due to a lack of information on the ground, it is not possible to independently verify these claims. Russian President Vladimir Putin says that all Ukrainian offensives in the past few days have been unsuccessful.
First of all, we can clearly say that the offensive has begun, as shown by the use of strategic reserves of the Ukrainian army. This is the first thing. Secondly, the Ukrainian troops haven't achieved what they wanted at not even a single area of fighting. This is an absolutely obvious thing.
And we can discuss this now with former military intelligence officer Frank Ledwidge, who joins us from Oxford. Good to see you, Frank. So Vladimir Putin says the Ukrainian counter-offensive has begun, but he also says it is unsuccessful. What do you make of that?
Well, good morning, Monica. I suspect you wouldn't be evacuating towns dozens of kilometres behind the lines if you had repelled the Ukrainian attacks, which is exactly what they're doing. It does seem that things are proceeding much as you might expect. There are considerable advances down an axis towards the town of Tokmut, which is about 30 kilometres down, perhaps slightly more behind the line. It seems that this is in Zaporizhzhia, which is in the south of Ukraine, which is where a lot of people expected the main thrust to be. And I would say that you're going to be taking losses, but you are going to be gaining land, which is exactly what's happening. Further to the east, there do seem to be quite significant gains around Bakhmut as well. So keep calm and carry on, as the old saying goes.
Yeah, you mentioned that this latest fighting that we're also reporting on is mainly around Zaporizhzhia. What makes this area strategically so important?
Well, Monica, it's several reasons, really. The primary one is that it is the main route in fact, the only route whereby Ukrainian forces can approach and hold at risk the supply routes to Crimea. And General Zaluzhny, who's the leader of Ukrainian forces, announced quite bluntly about 6 months ago and several times since that Crimea is going to be the centre of gravity for their counter-offensive. And what that means doesn't mean that they're going to retake it or they aim to retake it now, but they want to put themselves in a situation where they can put their troops in range and, as I say, hold at risk, which means to threaten Russian forces in there. And it does seem that the Zaporizhzhia route is the route they're taking on one of their axes.
Now, there's also a little bit of confusion, of course, about information without having people on the ground to verify that. Russian military bloggers, for once, they've mentioned that the first sightings of German and US tanks on the battlefield in recent days and that some of those tanks have been destroyed. How credible do you think this information is?
Well, the only credible information is information that's confirmed by reliable evidence. And as you say, there's very little of that. To the extent that there is evidence that can be reasonably verified, the answer is that there's about a dozen Western-made armoured vehicles have been damaged, a couple destroyed. You would expect that at this stage or any stage of combat, you're going to take losses. Much of that equipment will be repaired. That's the nature of this kind of war. And the important thing is that in all the evidence that I've seen, the armour has worked and human casualties seem to be fairly few in those situations. So in other words, there will be casualties, but there'll be very great successes as well. And we can look forward to those. And the last thing we should do is believe Russian assertions without any confirmed evidence, as you already said.
All right. Military analyst Frank Ledwidge joining us from Oxford. Frank, thank you so much.
Thank you, Monica.